I learned about the KCSAP project through my supervisor. He sent me the call. I placed my application. I was shortlisted for an interview, which I attended, and I was successful. So we went for an induction, and then I got the funding to do this work. So my topic is on cassava mosaic viruses and cassava brown streak viruses. I picked on cassava as my model crop since cassava, we are facing climate change and we are looking at crops that can help us mitigate the effects of climate change, especially to the smallholder farmers. And looking at cassava, it has potential to do well even when rains fail, unlike crops like maize. So if we are having cassava farmers doing well growing cassava, then we can be assured of food security. So I picked on cassava as a model crop, but then I also had in mind that there is an increase in demand for cassava-based products, even for industrial purposes like production of bioethanol. It's done in China. We can use it for starch and also for food security. And yet we realize that the production of cassava in Kenya is very low, mainly due to the prevalence of viral diseases. And as you may know, cassava is vegetatively propagated. That means we are using the cuttings as planting material. So if the virus is present in the cassava, then whoever will use the same material as seed is just transferring the virus from one field to the other. So we are seeing a situation whereby if these viruses are not well managed, and if our farmers do not know how these virus symptoms look like in cassava, then they are going to propagate the same, and we are going to have widespread viral infection in farmers' fields. So what I aimed to do was to find out which viruses do we have in cassava. Are they the same as those we had before? And what is their distribution? So I went out on a field survey covering major cassava growing counties. I actually looked at Western Kenya, that is Kakamega, Busia, Bungoma, Siaya, Kisii County. Then I went to Machakos County and down to Kwale and Kilifi counties, just to find out if the viruses found in the different locations are the same. So I collected samples. The samples were kept well in a cool box. And while collecting these samples, I also engaged farmers just to try and find out, do they recognize the viral symptoms in their field? And do they try to do some kind of selection so that they are planting clean seed? And my findings were surprising, that despite the fact that for over 2 decades we've had the disease in the viral diseases in Kenya, but our farmers still don't recognize these symptoms as a disease. So because of this, we find a situation whereby the farmers are planting infected cassava cuttings, and we have infection taking place at the point of planting. And with this, the plants grow and there is total loss of the tubers here. They don't harvest anything. So I also tried to sensitize the farmers to inform them that these symptoms are for this disease, and some of them, like cassava brown streak disease, the plant looks healthy. We actually have apps now, mobile apps, that are out there that can help the farmers to identify the symptoms from the leaves. But then you may find a plant looks healthy, but then there is a virus in it. So my work also tries to point out the fact that there is need to increase testing, especially in farmers that are intending to use their cassava crops as seed, and also to distribute the same to other farmers. In these regions, everywhere I went, there is cassava brown streak disease and there is cassava mosaic disease. This is unlike the reports that are there earlier, that cassava brown streak disease was confined to the coastal regions, but now we are having it in places like Kakamega and even Machakos, I reported cassava brown streak disease, and the same to cassava mosaic disease. So this is a problem that is in all cassava growing areas in Kenya. With my interaction with the farmers, I realized that there are efforts by various stakeholders to supply these farmers with some kind of varieties that have some resistance to the viruses. I also picked weeds just to find out, do we also have these viruses existing in our weeds? And I brought the samples, characterized the viruses, and I found that these viruses have regional clustering. Like the viruses found at the coast are not quite similar to those found in Machakos, and they are also not very similar to those found in Western Kenya. So that means that the viruses are a bit different, those found at the coast in Kakamega and also those found in Eastern Kenya. As the climate change happens, we are also going to see new diseases in places where they were not there before. So this work helps us to see if we are having the emergence of maybe cassava mosaic disease or cassava brown streak disease in places where they were not reported earlier. And I'm happy to report that, like Eastern Kenya, we never had African cassava mosaic virus in Eastern. And my work confirms the same, that there is no African cassava mosaic virus in Machakos County. And this is good, because if we have a combination of this with other viruses, then that is when we have 100% yield loss. And we are saying that we should make sure that this situation remains the same, especially where I've said that we should increase testing of these viruses, especially in seed systems. My work also reported that there is a strain of SCMV, that is African cassava mosaic virus, called SCMV UG34. This strain was present in Uganda, but I reported this in Busia County. So with time, you might see this in Bungoma, maybe Kakamega, and Siaya. Who knows, it might even move to other places. And it's reported in Uganda that this strain causes more devastating symptoms, both in terms of yield and symptom expression in leaves. Yeah. So we really need to do something about seed systems in cassava, so that our farmers are always using clean seed, and if possible, we supply them with resistant varieties so that we don't have widespread viral infections in the field. With this, if this is coupled with use of tolerant or resistant varieties and also provision of market for the cassava, I can assure you that we are going to change the story of cassava in this country. We have goodwill from the farmers, and they are able to produce a lot. And I'll even demonstrate to you the kind of yield that our farmers realize out here. Like a farmer in Meru harvested a cassava tuber that is taller than himself. So that means that if we are taking care of all this and making sure that we are having healthy cassava with our farmers, then we are surely going to realize food security. I'm quite grateful to the KCSAP project for this opportunity, because this work could not have been done without their facilitation. And especially this work is like an appendix to work that was done earlier. There were resistant varieties from the lab that were being evaluated for resistance to cassava mosaic, dual resistance to cassava mosaic and cassava brown streak viruses. This was a success story for Nigeria, but not for Kenya. So I was just wondering in my mind, how can we find out what is happening in Kenya that is making us not realize the same benefits as Nigeria? And actually this project came in handy and made sure that I had an answer to this question, whereby we are seeing that the viruses that we have in Kenya are not similar to what we have in Nigeria. So this is really, I'm really grateful to this project for helping us to find an answer to the question that we had in mind here.